Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters in Christ, today I want to talk about a divine truth that echoes through every page of spiritual law and personal transformation. Your old self must die for the new one to rise. This is not just a metaphor, it's a sacred process, a spiritual rebirth that each of us must embrace if we are to step into the fullness of the life God has designed for us. Florence Scovel Shinn taught us that the subconscious mind accepts what is impressed upon it with faith, and nothing transforms the subconscious more powerfully than the death of the false self. The self rooted in fear, limitation, and worldly doubt. That old self, the one who settled, feared, hesitated, and compromised, must be laid to rest. Only then can the divine self rise, bold, free, abundant, and aligned with the law of prosperity and perfect self-expression. In today's message, we're going to explore what it really means to let go of the version of you that no longer serves your highest good. We'll look at the spiritual laws that govern resurrection, renewal, and rebirth. And as we journey through this powerful transformation, you will begin to feel your faith take wings, your mind shift, and your reality bend to match the new divine identity you are stepping into. Get ready, because today, the old you is leaving the room, and the new you is about to rise in glory. The death of the old self is a spiritual law of renewal deeply rooted in both divine truth and the principles Florence Scovel Shinn passionately taught. She understood that life operates under invisible laws, laws that demand transformation for progress, surrender for renewal, and death for rebirth. When we speak of the old self, we are not merely referring to age or external identity. We are pointing directly at the deeply embedded patterns, fears, doubts, resentments, and limiting beliefs that have held us hostage, often without us realizing it. These are the inner shadows we carry, the voices that say, "You're not good enough. Stay safe. Don't try. It's too late." This internal script becomes the reality we live until one day, the divine voice within begins to whisper that a change is necessary. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we live in a world governed by divine order, and within that divine order, there is no room for stagnation. Everything must evolve, including our consciousness. The law of non-resistance, for instance, teaches us not to fight the darkness, but to replace it with light. In the same way, we do not fight the old self with hatred or guilt. Instead, we recognize that it has served its purpose. It has taught us lessons, helped us survive, and given us contrast. But just as winter must give way to spring, so too must the old identity give way to the divinely aligned self. And that process, though beautiful, often requires what feels like a kind of death, a letting go so complete that it shakes the foundations of who we thought we were. This death is not always dramatic or external. Sometimes it happens quietly, in the early hours of the morning, when you finally decide not to answer a call from your past. Sometimes it comes in a moment of silence, when you no longer feel the urge to defend yourself, to prove your worth, or to explain your dreams to people who cannot see your vision. And sometimes it is loud and painful, a loss, a betrayal, a breakdown that forces you to see that the identity you built was never rooted in truth. Whatever the form, the death of the old self is a sacred invitation. It is God saying, "I am doing a new thing in you. Will you let go so I can take over?" Florence often spoke of the divine design of our lives. This design is not accessible to the old self, because the old self is designed to survive, not to thrive. The old self builds walls to protect, while the divine self walks by faith. The old self clings to the known, while the divine self embraces the unseen. The old self seeks validation, while the divine self is rooted in worthiness. That's why the old must die, not because it is evil or wrong, but because it is limited. It cannot carry the weight of your destiny. It cannot hold the glory of what is to come, and so you must allow it to fall away. This spiritual death is often accompanied by what Florence called a crisis of consciousness. You begin to feel uncomfortable in situations that once felt normal. You no longer laugh at jokes that degrade your spirit. You no longer accept relationships that dim your light. And even though nothing has changed externally, something profound begins to shift within you. This is the divine upheaval, the internal restructuring, that signals your soul is waking up. It's no longer satisfied with crumbs, because it knows you were born for the banquet. Spiritual law responds to this internal change. As you release the old, you make room for the new. You create a vacuum, and the law of substitution ensures that something of a higher frequency fills it. Florence taught that nature abhors a vacuum. When you release fear, faith must enter. When you release bitterness, love fills the space. When you let go of control, peace steps in. But the law will not violate your free will. You must make the choice. You must allow the old self to be crucified, not in shame or defeat, but in power, in truth, in conscious surrender to a greater calling. And so, this death becomes a rite of passage. It's where you stop identifying with what happened to you and start identifying with who God says you are. You stop rehearsing the stories of pain and begin declaring the promises of power. You no longer call yourself by your wounds, you call yourself by your purpose. The death of the old self is not a tragedy. It is the beginning of alignment. It is the moment when you step out of survival mode and into sacred trust. Florence often affirmed, "I cast the burden on the Christ within, and I go free." That casting off, that letting go, is the beginning of freedom. It is not passive, it is powerful. It is the sacred decision to release what no longer reflects the divine image in you. And it is in that release that spiritual law begins to respond with opportunities, ideas, people, and moments that reflect the new identity you are embodying. Faith is the bridge between your past and your divine future, and without it, the transition from your old self to your true spiritual identity cannot occur. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that faith is not blind hope, nor wishful thinking. It is the assurance of things unseen, the absolute knowing that what is promised by divine law will come to pass, regardless of outer appearances. Faith is not just a tool, it is a spiritual law in motion. It is the invisible thread that connects your current situation to the greater version of your life waiting to be revealed. Without faith, the old self clings desperately to familiar pain, to predictable struggle, and to the illusion of control. But with faith, you step into a greater reality governed not by fear, but by divine order. Many people try to change their lives by external effort, new jobs, new relationships, new environments. But if they do not change their inner belief system, they are simply rearranging the same energy. Faith is the power that rewires the subconscious. It reprograms your inner narrative from, "I am stuck," to "I am guided," from, "I am unworthy," to "I am aligned," from "nothing ever works out for me," to "everything is working together for my good." This internal shift is what makes external transformation possible. Florence often said that your word is your wand, but that wand must be fueled by faith. You can speak affirmations every day, but if they are spoken with fear, doubt, or resistance, they hold no creative power. It is faith that activates the word. It is faith that takes your declaration and plants it into the soil of divine law. The old self lives by logic, but the new self lives by faith. Logic says, "I need to see it to believe it." Faith says, "I believe it, and therefore I will see it." This is why transformation is uncomfortable for the ego. It requires surrender. It demands that you trust something greater than what you can calculate. It challenges every limiting belief you have ever carried. But this is the only way forward. You cannot take fear into the promised land. You cannot bring disbelief into the field of miracles. Florence reminded us that the moment you align with spiritual truth, life begins to reorganize itself around your new vibration. But that alignment cannot happen while you're still doubting, still hesitating, still analyzing the how. A faith is the great leveler. It doesn't matter your background, your past failures, or your current obstacles. When faith is activated, it creates divine openings. It parts seas. It opens doors no man can shut. It transforms the impossible into the inevitable. Florence used countless examples of clients who were healed, delivered, and prospered, not through striving, but through faith. She would instruct them to speak the word, to stand still, and to know. This knowing was not arrogance. It was spiritual confidence. It was the unshakable conviction that God's promises are real and the law always responds to belief. This bridge of faith, however, must be walked deliberately. Each step you take away from your old self will feel unfamiliar. You may not have evidence yet. You may still hear the whispers of doubt. But with each decision to act in faith, to forgive, to let go, to give, to move forward, you are reinforcing the bridge. You are demonstrating to the universe that you trust divine timing more than your own understanding. And this trust is magnetic. It calls forth the right people, the right ideas, the right resources at exactly the right moment. Sometimes, faith means holding the vision when everything around you contradicts it. Sometimes it means walking through the valley without the benefit of a map, trusting that the destination is real simply because your soul knows it is. Florence would often instruct, "Look with wonder at that which is before you." She taught that faith doesn't wait for the outer world to change before it celebrates. Faith celebrates now in expectation. Faith speaks it as done. Faith praises in advance. This is how mountains move. Through the vibrational shift that occurs when a soul declares, "It is mine by divine right, and I do not need to see it to know it is coming." And yet, we must be honest about the discomfort faith brings. It stretches you. It exposes what you've built on shaky foundations. It brings up every fear you haven't dealt with so it can be released. But this is not punishment. It is purification. It is the stripping away of the old story so the new one can unfold. And as that process happens, the bridge strengthens. You find yourself responding differently. You stop settling. You no longer entertain what dishonors your spirit. You begin to act like the person you are becoming, not the person you used to be. This is the power of faith, not just to believe in God, but to believe God. To believe His word, His law, His timing, and His plan. Florence taught that divine law is exact and always just, but it requires our cooperation through belief. Not partial belief. Not conditional belief. Total, unwavering, childlike belief in the unseen good that is already yours. You cannot receive with hands full of the past. Spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and even physically, clinging to the old blocks the flow of the new. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that divine supply, right relationships, health, and perfect self-expression are already prepared for each of us, but the law cannot deliver them until there is space to receive. Holding on to outdated beliefs, resentments, regrets, identities, or relationships creates spiritual congestion. You may be praying for a breakthrough, but if your hands, heart, and mind are filled with yesterday's energy, the new good has nowhere to land. This truth is not punishment, it is divine design. The law cannot pour new wine into old wineskins, and it cannot usher in a new reality while you are still entertaining the frequency of your former self. Florence often emphasized that we live in a universe governed by substitution. When you release something, you don't lose. It is replaced with something better, something aligned, something divine. But that substitution cannot occur until you first let go. Many people pray for new doors to open while still refusing to close the old ones. They want a healthy relationship, but keep entertaining the one that keeps them small. They desire abundance, but hold on to beliefs of lack. They affirm freedom, but remain emotionally shackled to their past. In this state, the law cannot operate in full force. It is not about punishment. It is about vibration. What you hold on to defines the signal you send out, and what you signal, you attract. Letting go is not just about removing physical things. It's about dissolving inner attachments. You may have let a person go in the physical, but you are still replaying the betrayal in your mind. You may no longer be in that old job, but you still identify with failure, rejection, or disappointment. These inner attachments are energetic contracts, and until they are released, they continue to shape your reality. Florence instructed her clients to cast the burden and speak the word. This casting is not just symbolic, it is spiritual surgery. You are consciously choosing to release what is no longer true in order to make room for what is divinely yours. Releasing the past is also an act of trust. The reason most people hold on is fear. Fear that nothing better will come. Fear that they won't survive the unknown. Fear that they'll regret the release. But all fear is a lack of faith. When you hold on from fear, you place your trust in limitation rather than in divine supply. Florence reminded us that God's ideas for us are always greater than our own. What you're clinging to may be good, but what's waiting for you is divine. And to access it, you must be willing to empty yourself of what no longer serves your highest path. You cannot be filled while still full. There is also a false loyalty that many people confuse with love. They believe holding on to pain, or the memory of someone who hurt them, is honoring the past. But in truth, it is dishonoring the self. Releasing doesn't mean forgetting, it means freeing. It means choosing not to let the past define your identity or dictate your vibration. Every time you rehearse the pain, you reactivate it. And every time you reactivate it, you re-anchor yourself to an outdated version of reality. Florence taught that the word has power, but the word must be spoken from a clean slate. If your inner house is cluttered with bitterness, doubt, or resentment, the word cannot take root. Spiritual growth requires pruning. Just as a gardener trims back what no longer bears fruit, so must you let go of what no longer contributes to your growth. This can be difficult because the ego forms identity through familiarity. It would rather stay with a painful known than risk an unknown good. But divine law does not honor the ego. It responds to spiritual alignment. And spiritual alignment always demands that we unclench our fists, release the heavy stories, and surrender the attachments that keep us tethered to yesterday's limitations. It is also essential to recognize that not everything from the past is meant to come with you. Some lessons are complete. Some people were assignments, not soulmates. Some seasons were meant only to prepare you, not to define you. When you refuse to let go, you carry unnecessary baggage into the next chapter, and that baggage distorts your perception. You view new opportunities through the lens of old wounds. You hesitate to trust, to try to believe, because you are still holding on. Florence's teachings emphasize the power of the now. The law works in the present. The word is spoken in the now, and miracles happen in the now. But if you are mentally living in the past, you are missing the present moment where divine transformation takes place. The truth is, the new cannot enter a space that is already occupied. If your spiritual hands are clenched around what used to be, how can they be open to receive what could be? Your dreams, your answered prayers, your healing, and your abundance are not delayed. They are waiting for clearance. They are waiting for you to say, I release it. I no longer need it. I trust what's coming is better. This is not easy, but it is essential. Every release is a declaration of trust. Every surrender is a step closer to alignment. Florence said, I now let go of worn-out conditions and worn-out things. Divine order is established in my life. This is not a passive hope. It is a powerful command. It is a choice to stop feeding the past and start watering the seed of your future. Letting go activates divine substitution and alignment, a truth that Florence Scovel Shinn emphasized over and over in her teachings. According to spiritual law, nothing is ever truly lost. When you release something, whether it's a belief, a person, a job, a fear, or a pattern, you are not stepping into lack. You are opening the space for something better, something divinely appointed to take its place. The law of substitution states that once a vacuum is created, it must be filled. This is not theory, it is a universal law. And yet, many people resist letting go because they view it as loss. They associate surrender with failure or emptiness, rather than understanding it as the sacred act that sets spiritual law in motion. Florence often said, I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. That casting off is the trigger. The moment you release the burden, be it worry, anger, disappointment, or resistance, you create the vacuum for divine energy to flow in. You create an energetic gap that the universe rushes to fill. But this cannot happen if you are clinging. The law cannot override your will. If you are still energetically tied to something that is out of alignment, the new cannot enter. It is not that your good is being withheld. It is simply that spiritual law honors alignment and space. There must be an opening for the blessing to come through. The principle of divine substitution is not about compensation, it is about alignment. What you release is not simply replaced, it is upgraded, refined, elevated. You may let go of a relationship rooted in codependency and receive one rooted in purpose and freedom. You may release a job driven by survival and receive an opportunity that activates your divine gifts. The law does not just restore, it multiplies when you cooperate with it. Florence made it clear, what you give up in faith is returned in power. What you surrender from the ego is returned through spirit in right form. This is why clinging to what no longer serves you is not only unwise, it is costly. You are blocking your blessings by trying to maintain what is no longer meant for you. Holding on from fear delays the manifestation of your next level. The ego tries to negotiate with divine timing. It says, "I'll let go when I see proof of the new." But the law doesn't work backwards, faith is the evidence. Surrender is the signal. You don't wait to see before you trust. You trust, and then you see. This is the rhythm of alignment. This is the divine equation that Florence's affirmations were built upon. Speak the word. Release the burden, trust the law. Alignment is the natural result of surrender. When you let go of what no longer fits your soul's frequency, you begin to attract what does. Your outer life begins to mirror your inner shift. You stop chasing and start magnetizing. You no longer have to strive for what is already aligned with you. This is how divine order unfolds. Not through force, but through spiritual receptivity. When your heart, words, and actions are in agreement with truth, the law aligns everything in your external world to reflect that inner harmony. Many people wonder why their manifestations are delayed, why their prayers seem unanswered. Often, it is because they have spoken the word, but have not released the misaligned energy. They say the affirmations, but they keep the resentment. They visualize abundance, but they refuse to tithe or give. They pray for love, but hold on to bitterness. The law does not respond to words alone, it responds to vibration. And your vibration is shaped by what you are willing to release. Florence emphasized that divine substitution is not something you have to manufacture. It is something you allow. The moment you stop trying to control the outcome and instead align with trust, you step into divine flow. And that flow knows exactly what you need, when you need it, and how to deliver it. It may come through unexpected people, surprising timing, or unconventional channels, but it will come, because the law never fails. When you step back in surrender, the law steps forward in power. There is a deep humility required in this process. The old self wants to direct, manipulate, and orchestrate. The new self understands that letting go is the most powerful act of faith. It is saying to the universe, "I trust your replacement plan more than I trust my attachment." And in that moment of surrender, the whole universe rearranges to meet your new level of faith. The opportunities shift, the doors open, the energy clears, because you are no longer resisting your own expansion. Letting go is also an act of self-respect. It is declaring that you no longer identify with what dishonors your spirit. You no longer settle for what drains your peace. You no longer hold space for what no longer holds space for you. This decision elevates your frequency, and when your frequency elevates, your reality must follow. It is the law. Florence taught that nothing stands between you and your good except your own inner blocks. And those blocks are often just fears disguised as loyalty, guilt masquerading as love, or limitation pretending to be responsibility. When you let go, you activate the full power of the spiritual laws at work. You move out of force and into flow. You leave behind the scarcity mindset that says you have to fight to keep what's yours, and you enter the divine truth that says what is truly yours can never be taken. It is not about rejecting the past, it is about releasing its hold on your present so your future can take root. This is the power of divine substitution. It does not leave you empty. It leaves you ready. Ready to receive what is already aligned with who you are becoming, not who you used to be. Affirmation and spoken word rebuild the new identity, a truth that lies at the heart of Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings. The words we speak are not just sounds, they are commands issued to the universe. Every word carries a vibration, and that vibration either aligns you with divine truth or keeps you tethered to fear and limitation. Most people live unaware of the power behind their words. They speak carelessly, repeating phrases like, "I can't," "Nothing ever works out for me," or "I'm always broke," without realizing that these affirmations are shaping their reality. The subconscious mind, as Florence taught, does not argue. It accepts what is impressed upon it through repetition, emotion, and belief, and once it accepts an idea, it begins to outpicture it into your daily experience. To rebuild a new identity, you must first become aware of the identity you've been unconsciously affirming. Every time you declare lack, failure, or limitation, you are reinforcing the structure of your old self. The old self survives on words of fear, doubt, and defeat, but the new self, the divine self, must be built through intentional language. Affirmations are not magic spells, they are spiritual instructions. They are a declaration of alignment. They are you stepping into the authority that you have as a co-creator with God. When you affirm, "I am divinely guided," "I walk in abundance," or "I release the past and rise in power," you are not simply hoping for change. You are commanding change from a place of truth. Florence emphasized the phrase, "Your word is your wand." This is not symbolic, it is literal. What you decree will come to pass when it is spoken with faith and consistency. The spoken word reprograms the subconscious and begins to shift the energetic blueprint of your life. You cannot change the outer world permanently without changing the inner world, and the inner world is rewritten through repetition of truth. Speaking affirmations is not about denying reality. It is about declaring a higher truth until that truth becomes your new normal. You may feel resistance at first, especially if your current circumstances contradict your words, but that resistance is simply the old self being confronted and displaced. The more you speak, the more the old begins to lose power, and the new begins to take root. Affirmations should be personal, present, tense, and emotionally charged. Saying, "I will be successful," keeps success in the future. Saying, "I am now successful," guided, and aligned with my divine purpose, brings that truth into the now. The law of attraction, which Florence referred to in her own way, does not respond to what you want someday. It responds to what you believe is already true. That's why the spoken word is so critical. You may think differently, feel differently, or try to act differently, but if your words contradict your intention, you weaken the vibration. When your words and beliefs align, however, you create a powerful force that moves circumstances, opens doors, and dissolves obstacles. Florence's affirmations often included the phrase, "under grace and in perfect ways." This ensured that what she called forth came without struggle, manipulation, or ego interference. When rebuilding your identity, you must speak not only what you want, but how you want it to arrive. Through grace, in perfect timing, and in harmony with divine law. This kind of affirmation is not forceful, but it is firm. It is rooted in spiritual authority, not desperation. It acknowledges that you are not the source, but you are connected to the source. And through that connection, all things are possible. The new identity is not something you try on temporarily. It must be spoken into existence daily, sometimes hourly, until it becomes automatic. Just as the old self was formed through years of repetition, the new self must be consciously sculpted through practice. This is not a one-time declaration. It is a spiritual discipline. You speak it until you believe it, and once you believe it, you will begin to live it. Your decisions will change. Your posture will change. Your energy will change. And people will begin to respond to you according to the new vibration you carry. There is also a sacred element to speaking the word aloud. Thought is powerful, But the spoken word carries a creative charge. It is sound in motion. It is vibration turned into manifestation. When you speak, you activate not only your mind, but your body and your energy field. You command attention from the invisible forces that govern manifestation. That's why Florence advised speaking with clarity, authority, and gratitude. Gratitude itself is a high-frequency affirmation. When you say, "Thank you for my perfect health," or "Thank you for my financial abundance," you are signaling that the blessing is already received. This kind of affirmation collapses the gap between desire and fulfillment. Every time you speak truth over your life, you are chiseling away at the old structure. You are dissolving the inner barriers built by years of fear, trauma, and conditioning. You are reclaiming your spiritual identity, one word at a time. The new you is not created through effort alone. It is created through expression. When you affirm, "I am," you are speaking as the image and likeness of God. You are not asking, you are agreeing with divine law. This agreement is what opens the gates. This is how your new identity is built, not through struggle, but through word, belief, and alignment with truth. Florence's teachings remind us that the spoken word, charged with faith, becomes flesh. It becomes your new self. It becomes your new world. The new you lives by spiritual vision, not outer conditions. This is one of the most powerful distinctions Florence Scovel Shinn made in her work. The outer world is a reflection, not a cause. It is a photograph, not the film. It is a result, not the origin. When you live by spiritual vision, you are no longer reacting to appearances. You are directing them. You move from being a victim of circumstance to a conscious creator, aligned with divine law. The old self looks to the world for confirmation, asking, "Is it safe? Do they approve? Can I see proof?" The new self looks within and declares, "It is done. It is mine. I walk by faith, not by sight." A Florence taught that what you see in the material world is often a delayed echo of past thoughts, beliefs, and spoken words. That's why judging by appearances can be deceptive. You may see lack, but truth says abundance is on the way. You may feel alone, but Spirit says you are surrounded by divine companionship. The spiritual vision sees beyond the veil. It taps into the infinite reality where everything already exists in perfect form. The moment you align with that truth, the outer world begins to reconfigure itself to match your new frequency. But this shift does not happen automatically. It happens when you stop letting temporary conditions dictate your faith and start letting your faith dictate the conditions. Spiritual vision is not fantasy. It is clarity. It is the higher seeing that knows every challenge has already been resolved in the mind of God. It is the unwavering perception that there is no failure in divine mind, no loss in divine law, and no limitation in divine supply. This kind of seeing requires training, especially if you have spent years navigating life by fear, logic, or sensory evidence. The old self is programmed to believe only what it can see, touch, or predict. But the soul knows better. The soul sees with divine eyes. It recognizes that delays are not denials, that closed doors are protections, and that detours are often redirections to something better. Florence often reminded her listeners to look with wonder at that which is before you. This was her way of encouraging spiritual vision. Even in moments of uncertainty or disappointment, you are invited to look with wonder, to see the hand of God at work behind the scenes, orchestrating miracles you have yet to witness. This posture of expectancy is not naive. It is powerful. It keeps your energy open. It lifts your vibration. It magnetizes solutions, opportunities, and resources. While the outer world may appear stagnant or hostile, your inner world begins to activate divine order simply by holding the vision. When you live by spiritual sight, you are no longer controlled by the ups and downs of life. You become anchored in truth. Outer conditions may fluctuate. Bank accounts may rise and fall. Relationships may shift. Doors may open or close. But your vision remains fixed. You are guided by a knowing, not by noise. This knowing allows you to remain calm in chaos, decisive in uncertainty, and grateful in waiting. Florence spoke of this as being non-resistant to appearances. You no longer react in fear because you recognize that every outer event is an echo, not a verdict. The true reality is always unfolding, and your spiritual vision keeps you aligned with it. This way of seeing transforms how you speak, act, and choose. You no longer beg for change. You become the change. You no longer plead for a new life. You claim it. You walk into rooms with authority because you see beyond limitation. You make decisions not based on what is affordable, but on what is aligned. You no longer wait for signs. You become the sign. This is how the new you operates. Not from reaction, but from revelation. Not from scarcity, but from spiritual confidence. Living by spiritual vision also changes your relationships. You begin to see others not as they currently are, but as they could be. You hold the highest vision for them, even when they cannot yet see it for themselves. This activates healing, restoration, and growth not just within you, but around you. You stop trying to fix others through control and begin uplifting them through vision. Florence believed in the power of holding space for the good to unfold in every person and situation. When you do this, you become a vessel of transformation. You become a channel through which divine possibilities are made visible. It is easy to live by spiritual vision when things are going well. The real power, however, is revealed when you continue to see truth in the face of contradiction. When the account is low, but you still affirm supply. When the door closes, but you declare divine opportunity. When the body is in pain, but you speak life and health. These are the moments that shape the new identity. They are the proving grounds of faith. They are the testing places where your vision becomes sharper, your voice stronger, and your energy more magnetic to the divine good that is already yours. Florence never asked people to deny what was happening. She asked them to deny it power over their spirit, to recognize it as temporary and subordinate to divine law. When you operate in this way, the world no longer dictates your emotions or decisions. You are led by inner guidance, inner peace, and inner sight. You may walk through storms, but the storm does not walk through you. You carry the vibration of victory, even when evidence is scarce. You become a walking affirmation of spiritual truth, not just because you say the words, but because you embody the vision.